So the most prolific market we have, the broadest market we have at Sun, not necessarily measured in dollar terms, but when measured by the number of individuals that we can touch with our products, the software market is by far and away the largest. And we've worked very hard over the past 5 years especially to ensure that the products that we're building are not being built by Sun and then being delivered by the marketplace. That they are an evolution of a network of developers who are giving us the insights and wisdom to know how to improve these products on their behalf. So we have detached our software from our hardware. We have detached our software from our software. The fact that you can take our ZFS file system, for example, and run it on BSD, run it on a Mac, is a means of reaching new customers, of extending the reach of our developer community, and being able to talk to and influence, frankly, a much broader community than would simply be running everything from Sun. So the logos you see on within the circle are the communities that we have historically been cultivating. Some of these have been, and I would presume almost all of them have been off the radar of most of the analysts in this room. They're being built in the developer community in high schools, in junior high schools, in universities across the world. Some products like OpenOffice have reached a user base that is bordering, at least by our measure, on the staggering, about 100 million registered users now, which means there's about 100 million folks who are seeing the Sun brand, who are beginning to understand what we do for the marketplace, who are being exposed to Sun. So with a relatively small investment from Sun, we're able to reach a huge segment of the population, especially in developing nations. Secondarily, with our developer tools and our operating system, we've been able to reach not only into the Sun community, but also into the Hewlett-Packard community, the IBM community, the Dell community, the Intel community. The establishment of those OEM relationships is a means of expanding our overall market. Working with those companies gives us access to more customers and gives those companies access to more opportunity as well. Now, one of the communities on the left here, the MySQL community, obviously we thought was so attractive. We would spend a fair amount of money trying to embrace that community, to invest in that community, as well as to acquire the technology at the heart of that community. And I'll talk a little bit about that more in a moment. The core audiences for what we build here, developers first and foremost. They don't have any money, but they get a huge amount of influence. Secondly, the operators, the folks who are like developers using the technology on a daily basis to go run our systems at scale. And then thirdly, and most economically important to us, the chief information officers who want innovation, who want to use that technology to go run their business. So innovation's been the core of our focus here. Open sourcing for us is a means of accelerating innovation and investing and committing more resource to innovation. And the net effect is, I think, and I'd give kudos to the teams involved, we've really recovered a lot of the momentum on products that may have been flagging historically, but are very clearly now on an aggressive ramp. Now, one of the reasons we build these communities is that ultimately, same slide. Go back one. Thank you. Because we believe that we can go build, using those technologies, some of the most important data centers in the world. Economically, we monetize data centers. And we don't necessarily monetize only our own systems. We're in the business of delivering service and support to software as well. But the lion's share of the dollar revenue from a Sun perspective is going to be used to acquire systems. Now, we use the word systems deliberately. It's in part because when you look at that C48 rack, which is part of the Constellation system that Anil mentioned upstairs, you can go take a look at, can you tell where the computing stops and the storage starts? Or where the storage stops and the networking begins? You can't. And going forward, these three industries are going to be melding and merging together. And in part, they're going to be doing so because the underlying operating system behind all of them is going to begin to merge together as well. So at Sun, we've begun to use our operating system not simply to power our servers, but to power our network devices and our storage platforms. The net result of that is we can use one asset in pursuit of three separate markets. Customers get a much simpler management model, but they also get more innovation. So these are systems that we're not only going to build with our own microelectronics and microprocessors, we're going to be partnering with the likes of Intel and AMD and others. And as we do that, we can also take our platforms into non-traditional Sun customers. Non-traditional Sun customers being those that aren't using our operating system, those who are running Linux, who are running Windows, who are running BSD. And as we do that, the market for our systems, like the market for our software, is decoupled. The systems business can go after the broadest market possible, not simply those who represent a tiny fraction of the market, which are those that are running our software. So again, the software business is independent from the hardware business. The hardware business, the systems business is independent from the software business. Both are free to go after the broadest market possible. That's exactly the kind of change that we made recently when we created a microelectronics division. And the focus of doing that was to take what was historically a captive microelectronics company, one whose sole job in life was to supply our systems, and instead to turn them toward the merchant markets. To take a look at the innovation we had, whether it's in our network virtualization silicon or in our core microprocessors, and figure out ways we could go take them to market, either their products or their intellectual property. So we signed recently relationships with ARM, also with Marvell. We have begun to create a community around the Spark instruction set and the Spark intellectual property, which is now fueling academic textbooks, it's fueling course curriculum in universities around the world, and all of this is a part of ensuring that the technology we build is not simply internal to Sun, that we're going after the broadest market possible because there's innovation that can be used to deliver value not only to Sun, but to the marketplace more broadly. So stay tuned on this. We're obviously pretty focused on making sure we make the right moves going forward, and as we look at the marketplace, we see lots of opportunity. Lastly, and I would argue the most important of all for the customers that we serve, for whom technology is important, it's just nowhere near as important as the service they get off that technology. And for Sun, services really are two kinds of services. People-oriented services, where we're lending our expertise and our wisdom, our business processes, our support centers for companies that want the peace of mind to deploy our technologies on a global basis at the very core of their business. And then secondarily, the evolution of network services at Sun, which are the delivery of our infrastructure as services to our customers. And the types of network services that we're going to be building, and Rich Green and his team can talk to you a little bit more about this, extend from the most basic, which is we want to give an update to a platform or an update to a product, to other benchmarking or insight services that we can deliver to customers who are deploying our technology at scale. So in general, these are the businesses that we're in, and I will tell you it's at times frustrating to talk to somebody about, well, so what does Sun do? Because very few folks, unlike you, are actually going to sit through walking through all of these 4 circles in a Venn diagram. And the good news is we conveniently came up with a product that allows us to express what we do. And this is a black box, which is a large scale. This is actually a 20-foot shipping container. And what we do is we provide the technology that goes into a black box. So I want to give you a little history and insight behind the black box and then tell you what role it's going to play as we go forward at Sun. So one of the interesting elements and one of the, frankly, great things about Sun is that we've got lots of creative people who come up with great ideas. And this was actually the brainchild of Dr. Papadopoulos over there, who looked at a couple things. Number one, if companies are going to look at power as their second biggest operating expense, then won't they start to move their data centers to sources of cheap power? And you've seen some of the larger web companies go do exactly that, but if that's going to be the norm, then shouldn't we be building data centers that you could move? And if in fact you should be building data centers that you could move, if you've ever moved a data center, it's one of the worst things that can ever happen to anybody. Shouldn't we be building data centers that are portable? What's the biggest portable thing you can move? And that's it. And the world builds helicopters and trains and trucks and all kinds of things that are designed to go move these things around. And as soon as we announced our intent to go fit a data center into a shipping container, which turned out to be a really interesting engineering problem, it turns out there's a huge amount of waste in terms of just moving air around in a data center that we could close off when we built a self-contained data center, and we could make it 25–30% more efficient than your average infrastructure. So we announced this, and we announced it knowing that there was some latent underlying demand in the marketplace, and we were discovered by a lot of very interesting customers who said, this is actually going to help me go solve my problem. So we announced a few of them. The Stanford Linear Accelerator is using Blackbox just because they're out of data center space and they're out of patience, and they just want to put together, building blocks for high-performance computing infrastructures. Makes total sense. MTS is the largest wireless company in Russia. They have a 15,000 square kilometer service territory. There is not a whole lot of Class A data center facility in those 15,000 square kilometers, and so they're using these as the core of their switching stations. and as ways to run remote infrastructure. Greg and I had the privilege of spending some time with the chief architect of their service network recently, who brought us some new requirements for black box, and so we both had our pens out. We were waiting for some extraordinary technical insight, and instead this individual said, "I need you to build snow cages on them." And we said, "Why do you need snow cages?" And he said, "Because the problem we have where we deploy them is they end up with 15 feet of snow on them, and so you dig down and you want to get in and you can't." And I thought, okay, snow cages, 2.0. But we're hearing from companies that want to put infrastructure in Beijing in time for the Summer Olympics and then move. We're hearing from companies that want to go use them in downlink facilities so that when they're taking huge amounts of imagery down, they can do processing at the downlink facility rather than moving the data around. From folks who want to do modeling and simulation but want to do it, black box, kind of a discrete amount of computational horsepower. They just don't have to think about it. They just know what the capacity is. They can go make it happen. But probably the most important value in black box isn't the revenue that we'll generate from it. It's the fact that it allows us to capture the attention of the market that we care about. And in some sense, the easiest thing, my joke with Don, if you want to qualify a customer, show them black box. If they're interested, they're going to be a customer. If they're not interested, they're probably not going to be thinking in terms of the scale that we're actually looking at. We're not actually quite so black and white. But the point is, having rolled these around, we actually had one of these out here last year. We drive these around the world now. I think we've seen, at last count, something around 10,000, 15,000 customers have walked through them. And what do they see? They see the next generation rack systems we're building. They see our next generation storage. They talk to us about their next generation data center requirements. This is a means of capturing interest and captivating a marketplace. Because once you get beyond the physical manifestation of a black box, what you very quickly get to is, well, that's nice, but imagine I had a black box. How would I actually get work into it? How would I get work out of it? And now you know the genesis for XVM. XVM is Sun's virtualization product set, which will be both a hypervisor to enable any operating system to go run inside these black boxes. But it's also the provisioning and management infrastructure that you'll use to tell black box what's actually going to be running inside it, whether it's in a black box or it's in your data center. Obviously, it's not going to be bound to black box. But your ability to push work into it, to go run jobs, to go have that be set up on an automated path, Ops Center is what's being used today to go provision work into TAC, into that roughly half a petaflop grid in Texas right now. We figured if we were going to go start building a product to go after the marketplace, we'd start with the extremes and then bring those platforms back into the more traditional data centers. So that's what XVM is all about. And we also did something interesting when we introduced XVM, which is we started by saying it was free. We started building openxvm.org, which is a developer community around it. And why did we do that? We did that for exactly the reason that I suggested. In order for us to go after the marketplace, the first thing we're going to do is to go after the community, to go invest in the community, to listen to them, to have them help influence and shape what the technology ultimately needed to be. And for those that haven't really understood what's up with all this free software, why on earth are you giving away that amount of value? Why are you distributing free software? How does that accrue value to Sun? What I thought I would do is just give you a quick picture of how we see the market emerging. And just for fun, if I can actually get the map up here. So this is, second to my family picture, my favorite picture in the world. And the reason it's my favorite picture in the world is, if you can see this, these pink dots all represent the downloads of Solaris 10. And this is, by the way, this is just Solaris. And up until the last 60 days or so, you needed to love Solaris so much that you'd be willing to put up with a 4 gigabyte download. So when you look at the map, you get a sense that there's an awful lot of pink dots around the world. But even that doesn't do justice to my favorite picture, which is this one. And again, each one of these dots represents someone who has made the investment, just to focus on one market. And let me assure you, we don't have coverage behind every one of those dots. And yet, our ability to build a market is a derivative of our ability to build this kind of community. And just as an aside, I'll talk about them in a moment. If you want to know one of the most interesting things about MySQL, it's the fact that they add about 50,000 dots a day of opportunity onto this chart. And again, these are not simply downloads and then we're done. These are folks who opt in to our network, who opt in to wanting to talk to Sun. So one of the challenges we have right now, if we can go back to the slides, is that we have more dots than we have coverage. This in business is known as a high-class problem. We have more demand in the marketplace than we have coverage to go after that demand. And for the first time in a very long time, that's now the case. And so one of the things that we did, Don, Anil, and I pulled together a global partner conference a couple weeks ago. We brought together about 150 partners from around the world, serving as many regions as we were operating in. And we sat down for a very basic reason, to do two things. Number one, to say, we've got all this demand, you see it, we hear it from you, how can we more effectively go after it? But number two, for Sun to say, in no uncertain terms, we are now reinvesting in the partner channel. We are committing to a long-term business development plan that allows us to take the value that we're creating in the marketplace and begin to share it with our partner community. When you're operating at our gross margins as opposed to a third of our gross margins, we should be able to share more of that with you, but also use that investment to go after more of the market. So how do we take all those dots, how do we take all that opportunity and begin to syndicate our partners into that so that they are an extension of Sun's business and not simply a vendor in Sun's business? So if you want to know what we're doing to grow, I would argue the single biggest thing we're doing to grow we've done, which is we've created a market that is broader than we are. The second most important thing for us to do is to go resource that demand. And that's demand we're going to be resourcing with our own headcount, but for the most part, we're going to be specifically focused on resourcing in and among our partners, investing in programs, investing in seed units, investing in market development and business development initiatives, all designed to go after a market that is far broader than we are. Now, the derivative of this, the reason that we have this opportunity really comes back to this. Where we grow developer communities is where we grow revenue opportunities, but the ordering is important. And the logos and the brands that you see here extend across the world, touch tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people, and they create business opportunities for Sun that we're going to be very focused on. But these are investments that we begin in high schools, in universities, in course curriculum, in relationships with academic initiatives, which have very little economic benefit the day that we begin them, but once we fuel them up over time, begin to give us exceptional access to the marketplace and exceptional relevance to some of the customers that are within those markets. So we're growing in emerging companies, in startups, in new web companies across the world. Wherever there's a venture community, you're going to see us present. We're also being fairly aggressive about how we grow in emerging economies. And so one of the highlights of last quarter was the double-digit growth we've seen across the world in some of the most interesting geographies that are skipping over the burden of legacy systems that many of the more developed economies are now saddled with, and are instead going straight to that next generation of technologies to model the future, to go serve the future, to go reach customers, and ultimately to go deliver their own value. So you can see on the chart here, 66% year-over-year growth in Russia, 18% in Greater China, 26% in India, Brazil, Latin America. We're very aggressive. Mexico did very well. The Middle East and Africa is doing extremely well as well. So a lot of this is about not simply serving the world's data centers that exist today. It's about discovering those that don't yet exist, as well as optimizing or replacing those that do. So for Sun, we have been looking at a few key meters, which we outlined last year for you. One of those is, what are the number of customers that we can serve? We do not want to be a business that is defined by our current install base. How do we go after the next wave of interesting companies? Secondly, once we discover those companies, how do we make sure that we maximize the revenue and margin from those interactions? And the boundary lines between hardware, software, server, storage, network, it doesn't matter to us. We're much more focused on what's the holistic value we can deliver to a company and to a customer. And so the wisdom behind the acquisition of MySQL really came down to the following. We believed that the value of their business on a standalone basis was about what we paid for the company. which is to suggest if they continue to grow at the rate that they were on, and that rate, we saw as accelerating into the future, that in and of itself, that would be worth the purchase price. Now, on top of that, and again, roughly 100 million downloads, about 11 million deployments, 50,000 downloads a day. On top of that, there's an interesting fact here, which is that the vast majority of MySQL's customers never pay for MySQL. But 100% of them pay for the servers and storage that are underneath it. And so the opportunity to go serve those customers and those opportunities, the synergy value of the incremental infrastructure delivered into that marketplace was very attractive to us, as was the more profound point that nearly everywhere we went across the world, we interacted with customers who said, we want more competition in the database marketplace. We want more innovation in the database marketplace. We want a database that can help define the web world for us, but we'd also like to begin to understand how that can help me displace or serve the infrastructure that we already own. So what we're doing with MySQL, and what we'll talk to you about later on in Rich's talk, is we're taking MySQL from its traditional focus on the web world, and it's obviously going to continue down that path, and we're going to continue that resourcing aggressively. And we're going to begin to look at how do we bring MySQL, its interactions with some of the next generation technologies we have at Sun, like Lustre and ZFS, how do we take it into the high-performance computing world? And as importantly, how do we begin to introduce them to the customers that have traditionally looked at Sun for the peace of mind to know they could deploy infrastructure technology on a global basis? So the value of the company, plus the value of the systems opportunities, plus the incremental value of extending and expanding their market presence was, to us, the wisdom behind doing the acquisition. And the economics were very clear to us. As clear as the economics were, their customer base was similarly clear. And these are the folks who define the web in many ways. And as we looked across the world, we saw just extraordinary penetration, extraordinary market opportunity. Some of these are, in fact, all of these are paying customers, but there's an equivalent list of companies that are not yet paying. And as their CEO, Martin Mikos, likes to point out, his market is divided into, and I think our collective market is divided into, those who are willing to spend time to save money, and those are the folks who use free software but don't actually engage in commercial support contracts, and those who spend money to save time, which are some of the companies that are here, as well as larger enterprises that don't have the expertise or the patience to want to deploy and try to manage their own infrastructure. So again, for Sun, it's both about inventing the technologies as well as it is focusing our efforts against the marketplace. Our organic efforts, our resourcing efforts are reach out into the partner community, reach out into new customers, as well as our inorganic activities to go after some of the next generation growth opportunities that allows me to believe that we are exceptionally well positioned for growth. And this is growth that we are not going to harvest by simply chasing after a bunch of revenue opportunities. This is growth that we're going to go after holistically by enabling the marketplace, building out the communities, serving those communities well, and then fostering those companies that want to take that technology, put it into deployment to go generate business value or the value they seek. And so for a discussion of value, I'd like to turn it over to Mike Lehman, our Chief Financial Officer.
During the course of today's presentations, we'll be making projections and other forward-looking statements regarding expected future financial results and business opportunities. Our actual future results may be very different from our current expectations. We encourage you to read the 10-Ks and 10-Qs that we file periodically with the SEC. These documents contain a discussion of the risks facing our business, including factors that could cause these forward-looking statements not to come true. We do not currently intend to update these forward-looking statements. In addition, during the course of the conference, we may describe certain non-GAAP financial measures, which should be considered in addition to and not in lieu of comparable GAAP financial measures. For the most directly comparable GAAP financial measures and related reconciliations, please refer to the slides posted on the Sun Analyst Summit 2008 page and the earnings call financial slides and operations analysis, all of which can be found on the investor relations section of our website at sun.com/investors.